Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All the Things podcast, episode number 46, Freelancing, Contracting, and Remote Work. To be blatantly honest with you, I am 100% surprised this is working because this is our third or fourth attempt at recording. But anyway, I am your host, I'm Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again, hopefully, if it's working, by my co-host, Mike Horan. Now, I'm just going to go quickly through the segments here because it's going to be a Mike-heavy episode. I kind of want to make like a buzzword for that type of thing when it's like a Mike-heavy or like a Matt-heavy episode. Can we have I don't know what to say. Like can we have like something like, you know how like Sony used to be like Sony make dot believe? You know what I mean? Like I want to make like a slogan for it.
Well, I think Mike Heavy and Matt Heavy is kind of a slogan.
But I think that's the title, and we need to have like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Mike
like a
Heavy,
quick Mike Heavy like written points refined or something.
Or just refined.
Yeah, just refined. Yeah, just refined. Yeah. We gotta be really trendy and really minimalist, just refined. Period. But anyway, so I'm gonna go through these segments real quick, and then we'll go through our weekly pain points as usual, and then we'll go through the web news. But anyway, so segment number 1 this week is going to be what is freelancing, contracting, and or remote work. Segment number 2 is going to be our experience with that remote work, and then of course our recurring segment web news, which is this week going to be focused on influencers, as we all know all about them due to marketing. Now we're going to jump into our weekly pain point, and I'll toss it to Mike. Go ahead, good sir.
All right, so weekly pain point this week has been kind of like the same for 2 weeks, is motivation. I've been trying to organize my days a lot to make sure that I get the most production out of the day. But a lot of the times I would get just run into a wall because I just have so much to do. And that starts to screw with my motivation to do anything. So I'm trying to kind of control that. It hasn't been like a complete wash, which thankfully I've been better at, completely washing my days. I used to have a problem where if I ran into roadblock after roadblock, I would be like, okay, this day sucks, and I would just stop. But now I can at least power through it and get some work done, but I haven't been as productive as I want to be. So that's kind of what I've been trying to work on these last couple weeks. Hopefully by next week I can get through it and be my usual productive self. What about you, Matt?
So this week is kind of on the tail of a huge migration that we did last week. I think we mentioned that in the I think that was my weekly pain point last week, was we were doing a big old migration last week. And so now it's sort of email madness. So sort of the fallout from that, and passing information back and forth between multiple parties and that type of thing. So it's just more or less a volume of emails, not that they're problematic emails themselves. It's just there's emails all over the place from, fallout from that. And then there's, of course, the regular work all the time, or regular work, which comes in all the time at random. So that's basically been my weekly pain point, just straight up email madness, as I'm sure we've all experienced. So I'll toss it actually over to you again, Mike, and you can start your refined episode.
Let's refine this. So, segment number 1. What is freelancing, contracting, remote work? So, just going to be doing a quick overview of what it is, and then we'll kind of jump into our experiences with it. So, freelancing and contracting allow a person to function as a company and allow the ability for another company to hire them for a certain amount of time, but not work as an employee of that company. So they're able to pay for your services, but not put you on a full staff kind of with all of the stuff that goes with full employment. And the difference between freelancing and contracting, it's minimal. So I'll be kind of referring to them as one big thing in this episode, but know that there is a small difference. It's usually the time frame and the scope of what you're hired to do. A freelancer is usually hired to do smaller project to project stuff, whereas a contractor will be given a longer time frame and more either a large project with a larger time frame, or more of like I'm hiring you on a contract. You'll be working on multiple projects at the same time, and you'll be kind of working with us during that time. Whereas a freelancer is like, here's a project, you do it almost on your own, and then give us the result. So those are the kind of two things. Other than that, everything is the same. The process of payment and everything is almost exactly the same. How you do it also is very similar. So again, purposes of this episode, same thing. Now with both options, companies can ask you to work locally, like in their offices. But for the purposes, again, of this episode and of more of a software focused thought, it's not very common for a remote, like a freelancer or a contractor, to be brought in locally into an office. It's more common to have an offsite or remote work kind of environment while you're doing the freelancing and contracting. So we'll be talking about that more than anything else. So yeah, other than that, like companies don't really care as long as you complete the work that's assigned to you. So just make sure that like that's kind of what contracting and freelancing is different than normal employment, whereas normal employment you kind of go through and you do your day-to-day tasks. It might not be on one project, it might be on multiple projects, and yeah, it's important to finish everything, but it's more important to show up and do your work. Whereas contractors and employer and freelancers, it's more important for you to finish a project than show up to work.
And the thing with that too is when something is software, so when you're making something like a website or something like that, that's, a virtual good, it's easier to justify a remote worker when it's something not tangible like that. So as is just a real, rudimentary example, it's not like Mike and I are trying to, solder the same circuit board and we just keep mailing it back and forth. He does one part, I do another. That's outrageous. Most of the work that is done, conducted over phone calls and meetings, and all of that can be done the same way, like remotely, as it is in person. If you think about it realistically, a lot of the time you're probably calling your boss, you're not necessarily talking to him in person. And even if, let's say, you do talk to him in person a lot, that's not to say that a phone call couldn't just one-to-one replace that exact same, contact. You're not getting anything more, you're not getting anything less out of that. It's exactly the same. And in addition to that, a lot of companies will justify having remote workers just because it keeps like a lot of the costs down. So utilities obviously go down because you have less or maybe no workers at all in an office. And oftentimes you'll often keep the rent down. So some companies will have a small office where they keep some local workers that maybe do need to work on tangible goods, shipping or doing something like that. Whereas, sometimes if it's just pure software, so like Mike and I, we don't have an office like a formal central office at all. So nothing needs to be rented. Nothing needs to be shipped from us. There's no benefit right now at our scale for us to have an office. There's only benefit. No utility, no rent, or lower. Like there's no office rent. There's no commercial property is what I'm trying to say to deal with. It's only all local stuff. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at there is a lot of companies where they can spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on, a huge office. But if they could, let's say keep all the staff, but they cut out half the staff, that's less lights, less printers, less everything running, and the company's still running exactly the same. So that's kind of how companies justify it, and the amount of workers generally actually doesn't change. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it's a good point to bring up as well. As in this episode, we'll be mostly talking about the advantages from the actual worker's point of view, so from the actual person that's doing the freelancing and contracting. But there are a lot of benefits and also obviously a few disadvantages to actually hiring contractors. And we're actually in the process of getting our first contractor spun up right now, which has been really interesting and kind of brought out the idea for this episode. All right, and on to segment 2, our experiences with remote work. So although we're technically not freelancers or contractors, as we have our own company, we do almost all of our work remotely. Now, obviously, there's some differences in that. Like we do have some local work as well. But for the most part, even our local work can be done remotely. We do very, very few face-to-face meetings, only when they're really, really required, because some customers obviously appreciate that. But for the most part, it's all email, calls, stuff like that. Stuff that can easily be done even if we're in a different state, province, etc. So we don't have an office for all intents and purposes. We're pretty much just contractors and freelancers. So let's assume that we're contractors and freelancers for this segment. So we've been working on one remote contract for almost 3 years now. So that's been a big remote contract. I'd say we're contractors in that regard. And we've also had few like freelance types of contracts as we've been working even on this big contract. So we have kind of experience with both the small and the large portions. And I just want to state the kind of advantages that we see, the disadvantages of being a remote worker, and how we started, and the suggestions I would give. Obviously, it's not like a path you can really follow 100%, but at least a structure of what I would do to try to start again if I were to do that. So let's start with some of the advantages. Work from home. I mean, working from home is obviously a huge advantage for a lot of people. Maybe not all, but for me, it's a huge advantage. Like right now, I'm recording literally in my bedroom. I have all my office equipment here. Everything's set up just the way I like it. I can roll out of bed, jump into my chair, and start my work day. I don't have to, worry about traveling and stuff like that. Working from any place, and in quotes, that has good internet, obviously. I have worked in places that have bad internet. That has been a pain. Do not recommend that at all. So as long as you find a good place with good internet. So that means that like you can kind of break up your days. Sometimes sitting at home every day, all day will kind of drive you nuts. So you can go to a coffee shop around you that has seats and good internet. You can go. I sometimes go to the Royal Botanical Gardens around here, which has Wi-Fi all across the premises. It's awesome. I can sit on a bench there. I can go to their tea shop. I can kind of just I can choose where I want to work on particular days now, and for the most part, I can do any work that I want there because my laptop can handle it, and I kind of set myself up to make sure that I can do any sort of structure. I can pull in any repo that I need to do. I can run any dev server that I need to. I adjust my workflow to make sure that I can pick right up on my laptop while I'm working on my personal computer, like at home, my desktop. I like the ability to work while I'm traveling. So prior to this year, I was actually traveling quite a bit. I was going to Russia pretty often. I was traveling to the States a few times and stuff like that. And I don't like it when like I have to say that I need to, take a week off because I have to travel. I'd rather be able to, say I'm going to have different hours as I'm traveling, or even like I'll be able to adapt to the hours and be able to have regular work days while I'm traveling. And it gives me the opportunity to not only, continue to generate money and generate income while I'm going places and seeing the world, but also be able to kind of have that consistency with my employers so that if I do need to go somewhere, I'm not leaving them high and dry, and I'm able to still continue to do work efficiently. That's a huge thing for me. I think that's one of my probably top things for contracting and freelancing is that flexibility. Like when I used to work in an office, or when I used to work I used to be a cook in a restaurant, it was really always that game you play with them of being like, okay, I need to take a week off in 2 months in advance. So you have to talk to them, get approval from HR, go through the whole process. Sometimes they'll be like, no, that's going to be a really busy week for us. We can't let you go. And then you have to change your plans. I hated that aspect of being constrained in an office. And that's definitely one of my biggest motivations for going as a freelancer, as a contractor, as a business owner. Setting your own hours. I think this is a huge one. I think every person works differently in different hours of the day, and being able to adjust your schedule to be more productive is a huge bonus. Like if you're not a 9 to 5 person, which I'm pretty sure most people aren't 9 to 5 in my honest opinion. I think you kind of force yourself to be that when you have to. But realistically, you would probably be better off if you're a night person, working at night. If you're a morning person, working in the morning. And and I'm kind of a hybrid where I like to work in the morning, but I kind of hit a lull at around 2:00. And then I have at 2:00 is when I do some of my errands that I have to run, some of my mindless work and stuff like that. And I'll pick it back up maybe at around 5 or 6, or after dinner, I'll work another 3 or 4 hours to make up for it. I'm better in the evening, maybe not late at night, but better in the evening and the morning than I am in the afternoon. So I work around that, which is a huge advantage. And this is one of the things that you can do as a contractor. You can pick and choose who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. This doesn't always work out. Obviously, you don't know a person until you've worked with them for a little while. But for the most part, you can at least have that choice of, if you did not enjoy working with the person, you can stop working with them in the future. Whereas if you were locked into a job, that's not really up to you to decide for the most part. It's mostly your employer, and he makes you work with anyone that he needs you to work with, and it's not really your choice. You have to just live with it. As a contractor, you can be like, okay, I understand. During the process of even creating a contract with them, during the process of going to the back and forth, if you feel like this relationship will not work out on both ends, then it's probably better for you to move on to someone else. And that's obviously the ability to be picky and choosy will come with experience and come with some stability that you get. Like at first you're going to be like, want to say yes to every single contract, but eventually, trust me, you'll want to start, choosing your projects carefully and making sure that you work well with the person that you're working with. The other thing is, of course, the projects. You'd be able to choose any project that you want, any project that interests you, rather than just anything that comes onto your desk and you have to complete it. That kind of is a big motivating factor for me as well. Like I really enjoy working on interesting projects. It's not always interesting. Like work isn't 100% 100% awesome all the time, obviously, but at least I get to choose and kind of direct the projects that I am going to be working on, which is again a pretty awesome advantage. The ability to use the latest stable technologies. I think this is a big one. So a lot of times when you get into an agency or you get into a more, office job, they'll have their technologies that they use, like Bootstrap, whatever they've been using, WordPress that they've been using for years and years and years. And they're very unwilling to change because it's worked for them for so long. Now you can understand their point and stuff like that because they have so much structure around these technologies. If they change, they have to put all that, like the documentation and internal documentation in their company. They have to update that. It's a big process to be able to change like a larger agency's structure and the technologies that they work with. Whereas a freelancer and a contractor, it's up to you to decide what you want to work with. It's up to you to decide what is best for each project. So you can be working for this project, you can be using Vue. For that project, you can be using Bootstrap. For this project, maybe WordPress is amazing for this project. Like it's extremely, you can use technology to the full benefit of its potential. And I think that's a huge, huge advantage. And it's one of those things that like, it's tough to relate to someone that hasn't been able to like be agnostic in that way, be able to use all these different technologies. Because not only are you like, getting your knowledge base up and being able to be more versatile, you're able to provide really, really good service to your clients and, cutting edge service, making sure that it's stable. Of course, like you're not going to use a framework that was made yesterday. Make sure that you're using technology that's tried and tested, but at least you have that choice. Another huge, like big one for me, and I used to work, I live in Hamilton, which is just outside of Toronto, downtown Toronto. It's about an hour away. I used to work downtown Toronto, and the drive from Hamilton to downtown Toronto was about anywhere between 50 minutes to about 3.5 hours, depending on traffic. And this next one is no traffic. The ability to control your hours, even if you have to go into an office, you can control when you go into that office, stuff like that. Like, if you can avoid traffic and if you can avoid that time-sucking environment and you losing all that time to, for anything else that you could do in your life, that's a huge advantage. You can use that time to work more. You can use that time to spend with your family, whatever you want to do. Traffic is a big one. I know a lot of people out there are stuck in traffic a lot of the time. You might be stuck in traffic right now listening to this podcast. I'm sorry, but I've been there. Trust me, I've been there for a long time and it sucks, but it's definitely a huge motivating factor for me to not get back into that kind of situation. And then another one is a potentially a better work-life balance. Now, this depends on the person. Some people, when they freelance, it might make it an even worse work-life balance, but I know I'm actively trying to make sure that I have at least some balance between the two. Now, some days it's not going to work out because you just have to crunch. And you have that flexibility to be able to determine those days for yourself. But for the most part, I like the fact that maybe I take the afternoon off every once in a while to spend some time with my wife, to be able to do some errands, to be able to get a structure around everything. And that gives me, it's not in that time where I'm tired or anything like that. So I'm fully active and it's nice. I like the work-life balance of a contractor. I know it's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me.
And having the ability to work remotely means you're available for more opportunities. So you can't be moving around to 3 different cities to appease 3 different clients. But if you're conducting work via those remote means, emails, phone calls, etc., then you're able to easily do work with companies internationally. And when you start using those methods, like emails and calls and that type of thing, you're actually used to using them. So you have solutions in place for, shipping large files to people. You have infrastructure set up so oh, hey, I'll call you on this. All the different call apps, et cetera, et cetera. So you're literally just used to doing it. And it'll be exactly like as if someone was in the office or even just locally where you had to call them kind of thing. So That's one of the big things is you're actually opening yourself up for more opportunity because you're not pigeonholing yourself of, hey, I can only work with people in Toronto, or hey, I can only work with people in Hamilton. You can work with anyone pretty much anywhere as long as they have an internet connection and you have an internet connection. You're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes you, again, more versatile as an employee. So let's say you did do contracting for a bit and you had a couple of really good experiences and you made some good connections. Even if you go back to being an employee, that experience of you being able to communicate with all these different people at all these different times is going to be extremely beneficial for you as an experience. I always like to look at things where worst case scenario, let's say it doesn't work out. What do you get from it? So if you don't get anything, maybe it's not worth it. But for the most part, you're always going to get life experience. You're always going to get some sort of like reference. You're always going to get some connection. You're always going to get something that you can take back and use in a future endeavor. So that's why I like to look at things. But with all that being said, obviously, like if all these advantages, this all sounds great, why wouldn't everyone be doing it? And there are some very significant disadvantages as well. And you really have to, when you're going through the process of deciding if you want to become a contractor, freelancer, like doing remote work, you have to really sit down and think like, can you do this? And, go through both the advantages, disadvantages of everything, maybe just try it out for a little bit. So the disadvantages here are tough to keep focused and on track. So if you're one of those people that kind of needs structure, like extreme structure, to be able to do work for the 8 hours a day of your job and make sure that you're sitting in an office with a bunch of people around you doing work to motivate you, this isn't really for you, because again, you're not going to have anyone around you to motivate you. It's going to be you and only you for the most part. To be able to get stuff done, you got to be able to sit down and get stuff done. Now, at first, this might be a difficult thing and you might get better at it. So don't be hesitant to try it. At least that's what I would say is like, if you're bad at it right now, as long as you're able to see yourself being good at it at some point or wanting to become good at it, I think that's what's important. But if you see yourself as, just hating working alone, then maybe this isn't for you. So another thing is it's really hard to get started. It's one of those things where like, you really want to do it. And then you're like, well, but what do I do? Like, I can't apply anywhere. Like I can't, it's not a job. So how do I get a contract? And I'll talk about it a little bit more in the next section, but like, you just have to think that it's one of those things where you have to really do it yourself. Everything here is like do it yourself kind of thing. So you have to be willing to do that. You have to buy all your own equipment. So if at work you get a laptop, you get all the other equipment that you would need to do your like software engineering or web development. Here you have to buy yourself your own laptop, your own computers, your own backup solutions, your own software. Like there's a lot of things that you have to buy that, and it kind of adds up as you go. Like before when we were starting out, we're like, oh, we have our old laptops. That should be enough to do web development. And really it's enough to do the basic stuff, but what about backups? So, okay, now you have to get like some sort of cloud storage and physical storage. So you got to get some sort of backup going. What about software? Like what if you want to do some editing, like some video editing, some photo editing? Oh, now you have to get an Adobe subscription. Slowly starts adding up. And that's all on you to pay for. And you have to make sure that your contracts are able to pay for that. You also need to be multifaceted. So not only do you code now, but you're the sales guy, you're the accounting department, you're HR, your customer relations. You got to be able to do all those things and put it on your back and be able to, push it forward. You got to be good at all those things. Now, some of these things as you get bigger can be outsourced for sure. Like you can get an accountant, you can get some other contractors working for you to do this kind of stuff. But at the beginning, you definitely have to be able to do it. You have to be able to talk to customers. You have to be able to file your taxes, stuff like that. So make sure that you're willing to take on that extra responsibility. You don't have anyone to fall back on if you get sick. So imagine at work, sometimes you have a sickness and you can't go in that day. Well, you usually have other employees that can kind of pick up the slack, make sure that your clients are taken care of and stuff like that. Here, it's all on you. You're sick. Well, you have to be able to communicate to your customers that you can't do it. And if you have a deployment, that's not really an option. So if you're sick, you're sitting at your computer doing a deployment. We did a migration a couple of days, last week. I'm sure if Matt was sick, he would still be sitting there and doing that migration and coughing up a storm or whatever. But it's one of those things that like you can't, unless there's a severe condition, you're not going to be able to push anything back for the most part. So you have to make sure that you're able to take that kind of responsibility on yourself. it's also harder to find a mentor. It's harder to get help from other people in industry. It's not as easy as, turning to the cubicle partner or going into an office of your superior and asking for help. It's more like you have to go on a forum, you have to go do something else. Like you have to find the people that will help you. You have to be kind of your own mentor sometimes. You have to find the help online more often than not. And it's also tough to gauge how you're doing, because if you don't have anyone doing code reviews for you, if you don't have anyone doing any sort of helping you out or giving you a code base to follow, it's tough to gauge if you're doing okay. And this can also lead to imposter syndrome. We had an episode about that a few episodes ago, because you don't know if you're on the same level as everyone else. It's harder to compare. Work can be unsteady. This is a big one. And this was a big one for us when we were first starting out. So it's harder to plan anything like financially ahead. It's harder to plan, like, you want to plan buying a house. It's tough, like, especially if you're first starting out, because yeah, you might have some contracts now, but what about 6 months in the future? Are you going to have the same contracts? Or are you going to be earning less or more money? You can't plan like ahead like you can with a regular job, where you have, your $4,000, $5,000 a month paycheck, and you can plan that, 2-3 years in advance. You can see that either increasing or at least being there for you for the most part. So this is it is a pretty big disadvantage. I could see it being a big deterrent factor for people with families, people with mortgages to support. It's a kind of a stressful thing where you're like, this week I might have some money, this month I might have some money, next month I might not. So you have to be able to balance that. So maybe when you're going into something like this, if you're married, if you're with a partner, it'd be nice if one person still had something steady, or maybe you have some good savings to fall back on, stuff like that. It's important to think about that kind of stuff when you're starting out. Another smaller thing is like no employee benefits. So you're not going to get your dental, you're not going to get your health care. That's all on you to get. No RSP matching, so you're not going to get your pension. You're going to have to worry about that yourself. Again, you're kind of being your own accountant here. You're kind of being your own doctor. Not doctor, but you're supplying yourself with your own, with everything that you need, while a company would, have benefits for you as you're there, and you don't have to worry about paying them and stuff like that. With that, like these are big disadvantages, and you should be taking them seriously when you're considering going into freelancing. But again, I did say a lot of advantages as well. Nothing in the world is as clear cut as, you can't be clear cut on everything that you do. Nothing in the world is really clear cut. If it would be, again, everyone would be a contractor and we wouldn't be able to find work. But really, it does take a person that's willing to put up with the disadvantages, and that weighs the advantages that I was saying, like staying at home, working your own hours, stuff like that, more than the disadvantages. So you got to kind of weigh it yourself and decide. And now I'll kind of go through how we began, and what we did to start, and some other things that we picked up along the way that I think I would suggest other people to do. So one big thing, and what that helped us, is have a great network of people around you. When we first started, and we've said this story multiple times, we were thinking about IT, we were thinking about web design, we were thinking about many things. But what really helped us jump in and be like, okay, let's do this, is the fact that we had a client lined up right off the bat. So someone had already come up to us and been like, well, you're finishing school, why don't you come and help me do some IT work, and then help us with a website. So we already had quite a bit of work lined up as we were finishing school. So we're like, well, let's do it. And while we were doing that contract, we found another contract at the same time. So it became very evident to us that this is a good path to go on. Now, it wasn't as easy as that. I would say we got a couple contracts here and there, didn't give us like an amazing amount of income and stability. But it was definitely a good launching point, and definitely a good start. And great experience, because after that we were better at communicating with customers, being able to get more clients through our connections and stuff like that. So it was definitely a huge part of it. And and to do this, to be able to get a network of people around you and stuff like that, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And this can be one of many things. I know a lot of people out there are introverts and they don't like going to meetings and stuff like that. So if you're really introverted, my suggestion would be join different web development discords. There's plenty of web development discords out there. One of them being ours, actually. And there's nothing like, this is kind of like a shameless plug.
Self plug. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shameless plug, but it is a serious plug, because if we were looking for extra contractors, and this could happen, this is not out of the realm of possibility, and you were in our Discord and an active member of our Discord, and we knew like we were talking to you and we can work with you very well, why not use that Discord, like use that community to hire people that we already have advantage with? It's very difficult to find talented people. That's a very big problem. That's why there's so many companies out there that are trying to solve it, like Indeed and LinkedIn and all that. Like those are massive companies with multi-million, like billion-dollar valuations and stuff like that. It's a very difficult problem to solve because on a larger scale, it's extremely, extremely hard. And when you get a good worker, it's extremely hard to keep them there. So when you have a community around you, when you're in a community, it's a lot easier to go out to find other people that are looking for work, other people that are hiring people and stuff like that. So again, shameless plug for our Discord, but join it up. It's it'll be in the show in the show notes. You never know what you're going to get from there because there's plenty of awesome, talented programmers in there that might start their own things at some point and might need help. We're also gonna maybe expand. We might need help as well. It's just one of those things that you just want to get into as many groups of people around, get as many people around you that are like-minded as you can, with the abilities that you have. So if you're introverted, like I said, Discord is a great opportunity. There's other ways to do it. If you're willing to put yourself out there even more, going to talks, going to events around you, like software development events, web development events, talking to people there, that's a huge one as well. Like if you're able to do that, I would highly, highly recommend it. We haven't done that very much, mainly because we've been busy for the most part, but I would definitely like to do that more often in the future. I would love to even like give a talk or something like that. I'm sure it would be interesting anyway, nonetheless. But other than that, follow industry trends. So make sure that you're obviously don't follow every industry trend. Don't get into the cycle of being able to like know everything that's going to happen. But if you see a framework that's picking up really well and you already have a really good base of knowledge skills, then maybe it's good for you at this point to jump to that framework and learn it a bit so that when you get to a point where you're trying to talk to a community, you have that knowledge to fall back on. So go to different technologies that are evolving. Stay up to date with what's new in HTML5 infrastructure. What's the next thing that's going to happen? It's important to be on top of things because as a contractor, as a freelancer, you're going to have the ability to use those skills. Whereas at a smaller or like in a firm or in non-remote work fashion, it's not as important in my opinion. The other things is there's always sites like Upwork, Kijiji, Freelancer.com, stuff like that. Like there's nothing wrong with you trying to build up a profile on there and try to apply for some jobs. Worst case scenario, get some experience, talking to customers on there, get some exposure. It's not maybe it's not going to lead to anything, but it'll at least lead to you trying to evaluate yourself against other freelancers, maybe elevating your skills to a point. Maybe it'll just lead to you having your name out there. And to like, ironically, leading on to my next point is being lucky. We got really lucky with that as well. Like I believe our largest client, the one that that we've been talking about quite often on this podcast, we've been with them for over 3 years now. We got them by putting ourselves out there on a site. What was it? Upwork?
Guru, I think.
Guru, yes, Guru. Sorry. So we got there putting ourselves on the site like Guru. We just put ourselves as Chrome app developers on there, and the person, he reached out to us. I think it was through the site, but then we kind of merged away from that site and started working without that site. But we got ourselves out there. Again, we put ourselves out there on a bunch of different sites, and you try to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. That was definitely our approach, shotgun approach. Try to get our name out as much as we possibly can, and we got lucky. Again, it was lucky, I would say, because it turned out to be a great client. We have great client like relations with that client now. We don't see it really ever going away as well, which is huge. Like that's a rare thing to happen. But regardless, just having that ability, like put yourself out there, be in as many things as you possibly can if you're doing it, and grind. Like it's not going to be as easy as putting one ad on Kijiji and then like just sitting there in front of your computer and staring at nothing until someone emails you. No, you got to do many, many things. Try it, and ideally you would want to do it while you have something stable to fall back on as well. we didn't do that. We were just coming out of school, but that would be kind of my suggestion.
And with that being said, like you've kind of already touched on this, but like the smallest contact can lead to years of constant work. So you've already mentioned that like a couple of our long-term clients, was just something as simple as just like a phone call. And sometimes it's kind of, some people will, like, I guess it's part of like the part where you're saying you could be picky. I think it was in your advantages where you say you could kind of be picky with your work. But what we found is that sometimes a good client will at the very beginning request actually a very small amount of work and not actually state that it's kind of a test for you. And then as a result, let's say you do it and you do that very first task and you don't do it well, they may actually be using that as a bit of a testing ground, again, without disclosing that. And then they'll like your work and they may employ you to do more, right away, or keep you kind of in their contact list for that. And that's happened with a couple of our clients as well, where they've contacted us for, let's say, something. I'll give it like a more specific example. So we had one where we were just fixing something for the person. And then we ended up doing 2 to 3 projects with them afterwards. So just from that small fix, all the way to this now where we're kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff for them, that's kind of how that grew. So yes, be picky, but don't necessarily, toss stuff away, because when you're starting, you're trying to do everything, but don't kind of get cocky is I guess what I'm trying to say. Let's say you have 3 or 4 clients, you'd like a 5th, let's say, and there's a couple of people that are doing small stuff. If you absolutely don't have time, sure, maybe don't do the small stuff, but that small stuff has a decent potential, at least in our experience, to grow into something better, or at least get you kind of on their contact list, and they might even refer you to somebody else. So don't necessarily just toss away those small things, and actually use them as an opportunity and kind of see that there may be a potential there. Just sort of a disclaimer or kind of a warning, if you will, because we've had some very large successes by doing that type of thing. Now, I'm going to move on here to, I think, the web news now. And you guys are not hearing the problems we've had, but this is the third attempt, a third stab at recording this now. At the beginning, it was the second. Now it's the third, I believe. So this is being cut in repeatedly. We literally record for about 15 to 20 minutes. My app crashes, and then I have to restart the whole thing. So that's my life. But anyway, web.
That's my life.
That's just the way of the road, the way she goes. That's just it. It's just like how I what I'll call a very small brief thing is Ricky a printer. Never get me to troubleshoot your printer, because my troubleshooting will include, without plugging it in, if it doesn't work the first time, picking up said printer with like plugs and all, it's all still plugged in, ripping it from the shelf it's in and tossing it straight into a garbage can. That's what I did to my printer out in the back. Well, please never get me to troubleshoot your printer.
Oh, I have a printer problem for you, 100%.
I do house calls. But anyway, okay, web news, influencers. Big printer influencers here. Anyway, influencers seem to be the next big thing when it comes to marketing online. And years ago and even today, big names are used to sell products. But now with the internet, so big names, I mean like movie stars and that type of thing. But now with the internet, and more specifically with the invention of social media, there are actually thousands of influencers trying to sell you anything and everything that you can possibly think of. So no longer is it just an actual movie star, it's just, some guy that has lots of followers. So these influencers use a variety of tactics to maximize their followings on apps, things like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And due to the massive amount of the followers that these influencers gain, it's obvious that their tactics would pour over into traditional business social media channels that are just trying to sell their product more or less directly through their Instagram page or other channels. So what I mean by that, just a brief explanation, would be if an influencer is doing some sort of growth hack, or not necessarily even a growth hack, but they're doing videos in a certain format, that the product, like let's say just some product. So this influencer is doing it, they're advertising a whole bunch of products. Some energy drink or something might see that and be like, hey, we should do, these enthusiastic videos just like that influencer, because those enthusiastic videos are getting, a bunch more likes, a bunch more followers, giving them a bunch more followers. So let's do the same type of format for our product to sell it, and we'll get a whole bunch more followers. So there's kind of like that mimicking. So should standard company media profiles start following into the footsteps? Okay, one second. Let me rephrase that question. Whew. Should standard company social media profiles follow in the footsteps of the influencers that they often hire? That's a question. And should there be a clear separation in strategy? So that's one question. Second question here, or the two-parter question. Now here's the third question. Or it's the second question. What question are we on, Mike?
It's the 5th or 6th question.
It's at least the 15th question. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, next question. Are there? Can you tell I'm tired of restarting the calls? Are there popular profiles out there that aren't considered influencers? So, for example, if you have a lot of followers just because you post nice pictures, are you considered an influencer then, or are you just using the profile or using the platform like it was kind of meant to be in the beginning? So. And now another one here. If someone were to start a social media presence online today, should they be acting like influencers to gain followers? Or are there different audiences that they should be tapping into? So that kind of taps into that first question, like I said, which is, should these company profiles be mimicking those influencers? And then the last question here, are influencers, quote unquote, the only way social media is useful from a marketing perspective? And I'll let Mike kind of take it away with that and give you your opinions on the influencers. It's a lot of questions, at least 750,000 questions in there.
Yeah, there's not enough questions in here. All right. Well, as an expert in influencers, I've got some great advice for you. Should a standard company's social media profile be following in the footsteps of influencers that they often hire? Okay, so for a clarification, what do you mean? Do you mean like as the influencer decides to use their product, they kind of adapt to the way that the influencer uses the product that they're trying to influence? Or are you meaning like using more influencers?
Yeah, so I'll give like just a straight up, totally theoretical example. So let's say there's a mountain bike company, right, that's hiring an influencer, okay? And it doesn't necessarily need to be hiring the person, but in this case, this mountain bike company is hiring somebody who uses mountain bikes all the time on their profile. That mountain biker, right, the person, the influencer, has, a whole bunch of bikes in their disposal. That week, they're going to ride that mountain bike that they're sponsoring down the hill and then say like, hey, use this mountain bike of brand A, right? They do like maybe 3 or 4 posts, and they're all super enthusiastic. They have like they have a real big caption, the whole bit. So the actual profile of the company that is selling the mountain bikes sees that, they've hired this influencer. They see that and they say, hey, let's try to actually mimic that. Let's have that longer caption. Let's have that enthusiastic video. Let's have maybe more video content than posts. Maybe let's have a mix. They try to mimic the formula that the influencer is using in order to gain the followers, because clearly the influencer is successful on the platform. And so they're basically trying, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like the straight up company profiles copying the influencer profile methodology.
I think personally that it depends. And that's the biggest cop-out answer, but
okay, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening to the All Things Podcast. And I'll explain it. So, in some cases, I think that's a great idea. If you're a smaller company and you manage to land a large influencer, because maybe the influencer saw your product by accident, really enjoyed it, reached out to you, and you then made a deal with them, right? You're a smaller company, the influencer's larger than you. In that case, it might be a really good idea to mimic what the influencer's been doing, especially if it falls directly under your jurisdiction. So like you said, the mountain bike thing is a good example. So if this mountain biker is doing a bunch of awesome mountain bike content on his Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and it's working great, he's increasing like crazy, and you're just starting out as a mountain bike company, it probably makes sense to take some cues from them. Maybe not mimic one-to-one, because that's going to look weird if people really enjoy this mountain biker and most of your audience already subscribes to him, but take some pointers, like go through his Instagram, go through all of his social channels and see what he's doing right. I think that's a huge thing. Now, the other thing I would say, and this really doesn't apply to anyone that's listening to this podcast, but I think as a large company like Nike or something, when they hire an influencer, I don't think they're going to, I think it would be a bad idea for them to go in and try to mimic the influencer style. because then people are going to be calling them like posers or whatever. Like it could have bad backlash, because again, Nike is usually bigger than the person that's influencing them, like they're using for influencers, because they're using so many.
Right.
So I think that's why it depends. But I think for the most part, anyone that's listening to this podcast and anyone that's going to be going and starting their own brand of some sorts and wants to hire an influencer in any capacity, it'd be smart to kind of take cues from whatever that influencer is doing. And in my opinion, when you're hiring someone or when you're using an influencer, it's much more effective when the influencer actually likes your product. And I think anyone would agree with that. Obviously, it can't be all the time. Like if you really want to hire someone specific and they're willing to do it, then maybe that's different. But if you ever get to the point where you can, put it into a product, like put your product into a person's hands, and they really enjoy it, and they're willing to be an influencer for you because they like it, that's going to come across as a lot more genuine, and that's going to come across as a lot more important, like a lot more easy for the people to consume and then be able to use your product or buy your product in the future. So influencers are a huge thing, and I agree that they are kind of taking over social media, because so let's go on to like one of the next questions you said. Should a standard are the popular profiles out there that aren't considered influencers? Are there popular profiles out there that aren't influencers? And I want to say yes, but I'm also hesitant. And that's kind of scary, because you think about it, social media wasn't really designed to make a million influencers out there. It was designed to be able for people to showcase their lives and stuff like that. Now it's become this thing where everyone just gets a certain amount of followers, gets a certain amount of influence, and then just profits from that influence, because it's really hard to say no to that. Like, let's say you're a person that started out before this and you didn't have those bad intentions. Like, your intentions were literally just to share your life.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad intention to be an influencer. But
yes, exactly.
Right. Well, you were saying bad intentions.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Bad intentions is a bad word. But like, let's say that you didn't start to be an influencer regardless. Okay. So it's not bad, or it's not bad. It's not great. Whatever. So you just started to showcase your life on social media because you have an interesting life. You think people would be interested in it. But then all of a sudden you gain a bunch of followers. Maybe you have like 50,000, 100,000 followers, and you have email after email with companies trying to give you money. Like, literally trying to here's money here, literally, please showcase my product. It's really hard. Like, I don't blame them for saying, yes, let's do this, because like, it's hard to say no to money. And I think that once you get bigger, it is really a responsibility that you have to showcase products that you do yourself enjoy, because you have that option. But even, let's say you're a smaller influencer, quote unquote, and that's what you want your job to be. Now, I don't think that that's a great way to live your life, but whatever. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. It would be really hard for you to say no to a product, your first product placement, your second, or whatever, like your first few product placements, even if you didn't like it, because it's money. Like, you're getting paid to do this. It's your job. That's what you're considering as. So it's hard. I understand their conflict with this, and I understand why there are so many influencers out there, because it works when people follow you, when you follow people and you see them using a certain product, you like inherently know more about that product. And inherently, when a situation comes up where you would need a product like that, you're probably going to think of one of these products first, the ones that you've seen. You're not going to think of a product that you haven't seen before. So it's a smart way of advertising. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But it is kind of scary and a little bit concerning, the fact that almost everyone that I can think of on Instagram, on Facebook, has a large following, you can probably consider them an influencer in some way, shape, or form. Like, maybe that's not their main purpose on their accounts. Some people have really awesome photography accounts. I can't remember which one right now off the top of my head, but there's like a really awesome photography account that I follow on Instagram. And I think almost all of their content is mostly just amazing photographs and amazing, like they're just artistic work. And I haven't seen any evident influencing on their part, but it wouldn't surprise me if they've, every once in a while mentioned a camera company or something like that in their description. And I wouldn't blame them for doing that either. So, and are they an influencer? Are they not? I don't know if that's the case. Like, is there like, if you've at any time during your social media career mentioned a product for a profit, is that considered influencer?
Well, that's the big question, right? So I think the weird disconnect is that so for example, we created we obviously have an HTML all the things Instagram. And we repost a bunch of people from the communities, their web designs, their code stuff, whatever, right? It's sort of related to what we're doing. At the end of the day, it's because we have something tangible, which is the podcast, which is any sort of guides we write, or anything else that we do, apps, whatever. Anything else that we do under this sort of brand is sort of connected to it. It would be weird if it's not weird, but it's strange to me personally to say I'm going to create an Instagram page and I am going to just repost stuff and I then am going to advertise on that page because it feels like it's not what the intention of the platform is. With that being said, though, people do post things like I have an old like video game screenshot, like video game photography account on Instagram that's like not really active anymore, but like I used to post on there, and at the end of the day, if that had taken off, I would essentially be considered an influencer, and I would be advertising on there without any thought. You know what I mean? Because it's not like I'm doing anything evil, and I'm obviously disclosing that I'm advertising when I'm advertising. I think it's more not strange, but it's like a different class when the account is made for something tangible versus the account being made just for the fact that there's an account there. Like that old video game screenshot, video game photography web page or Instagram profile that I had didn't have a website associated with it, didn't have an app associated with it. If that Instagram account gets deleted, it's all gone. With the exception of the files on my computer, that presence is gone. Whereas if Instagram kicks us off, Twitter kicks us off, Facebook kicks us off, if everyone kicks us off, we still have, our own website. We can re-upload stuff, to replace it, and the presence is still there. So it's like we're not in it to become an influencer, but you can become an influencer because of what you're doing. Whereas some people are starting an account saying, okay, I want to get a bunch of followers going because I want to become an influencer. And what they're really doing, realistically, what they're doing is they're making a modern billboard. They're making a modern billboard that will attract a whole bunch of eyeballs with whatever it is, photos or videos or whatever. And then because there's so many eyeballs looking in that direction, they now have a prime billboard spot where they can now sell ads in that spot. It's the same thing as the people who own a property down a highway and put a billboard up, or like sublet it or whatever to another company that does billboards. And then they, put up a big advertisement, over their property essentially because it's pointing on the highway. That person didn't buy that house because they wanted, or buy that land beside the highway because they maybe in some cases they did, but in general, they bought that land and that house to live on. They didn't be like, man, I can put a billboard on this thing. They weren't ready to do that immediately. And so it's literally just the fact of monetizing that piece. But what the strangeness is that I think the word influencer, I would personally assign the word influencer to the person who doesn't have a product for themselves to sell. Like, and I don't mean an influencer as in like the English definition. I mean like a social media influencer. To me, when I think of that, I think of the person that specifically posts, certain pictures, certain videos, certain whatever in a certain genre that attracts a bunch of likes, and as a result, they have a nice spot to sell things. They basically have eyeballs looking at their profile and their posts, and therefore, as a result of that, they can sell that space. That's it. People like us, we can become like literal, like English definition influencers due to our following, but we didn't just create an Instagram and say, let's sell stuff on our Instagram. if that makes sense. I would say that there should be, or at least in my own head, maybe, there's like that clear separation for me where these are social media influencers. These other people are influencers. Like if you take anyone who's like super famous, just take some random I don't know, let's take a nerdy guy. Let's take Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a nerdy guy. He's an influencer because he created Microsoft. He didn't create the Microsoft Instagram page, post a bunch of pictures of computers, and then start selling that space and they became super rich. He, created Microsoft alongside some other folks, created Microsoft, has that. As a result of him being that, he's really big. Social media comes around, makes accounts. He gets the followers because of that. Now he could, and I don't follow him, so I don't know, but now he has a whole bunch of eyeballs looking at his profile. He is an influencer because of that. If he keeps posting stuff like potatoes should be like dyed purple, and keeps influencing that ridiculous point, some people are going to think, hey, maybe we should be dyeing like potatoes purple, right? He can influence that decision to an extent, or at least push that point onto however many followers he has. But he didn't join with the intention of gaining followers in that way. And I think this is where the algorithm gaming comes in. And this is the weirdness of social media now, where this is why everything feels really fake. Where people are putting like if I just post a picture, I'm like, hey, I took this picture, I want to share it. I go and I share it. Generally speaking, in real life, I don't care what everyone else thinks, right? But at the same time, or like what everyone else, I'm meaning like strangers think, I'm more or less sharing it with my followers, I guess. But at the end of the day, I need to put hashtags, I need to do this and that and the other thing to attract more likes, to attract more of that. You're trying to gain traction on that particular platform. And that's where it starts becoming kind of fake, because people are starting to frame things a certain way, show things a certain way, post it at a certain time of day, because that's what the influencers have done to gain the followers without having a substance behind them in terms of a product or something like that, right? A prime example could be like what would be a good example? I told you about this on the other show the other day. So I watched this one guy that like dives for treasure, right? He dives for treasure on YouTube. I'm interested in those videos. That's great. So he goes and dives for treasure. That's why I'm there. Now, as a result, he has a bunch of products that he uses to dive for treasure that if I were to ever do that, which I won't, but if I were to ever do that, I would be like, the first thing that would come to mind would be like, oh, he uses this type of tank. He uses this type of mask. He uses this type of life preserver. I don't know anyone else. He influenced my decision. If you asked me, hey, do you know of a good life preserver? I could only tell you that. He influenced that, right? But he influenced it because of the other content. He did not go, I'm going to make cool diving videos with like that are, 60 seconds in length, 30 seconds in length, whatever, specific for Instagram, just to game the algorithm to get clicks. He might be gaming, and when I mean gaming, I don't mean that nefariously. It's like everyone, tries to play the algorithm to get more influences, to get more impressions, to get more likes, to get more whatever. But he didn't just do that. He maybe did that to draw people to the videos, right? I'm not saying he even did this, but like hypothetically, if he was gaming the algorithm at all, he was gaming the algorithm to bring people to that content. Same with us, right? We would be we're playing the game where, we're legitimately sharing cool stuff we see in the community. We want other people to like do well, and we're trying to bring people into our podcast and our website. At the end of the day, though, I'm not just trying to sell people on the latest JavaScript book. That's not my intention. If someone comes to us and wants to promote on our page, certainly I'm open to that. I'm not saying that I'm against posting a commercial, and I don't think it's like an evil, nefarious thing. But I think that that's the clear definition, and I think this is where the line gets blurred, because these guys only get followers and only get likes. That's their only intention. As a result, they've mastered doing that, and because everyone on the platform is actually after that. Influencers are actually influencing the platform that they used and are using to be an actual influencer. That's where it's weird. I know that's super long-winded, but it's a weird, like you kind of get what I mean though, right? Like everything kind of seems fake on Instagram and stuff. It's weird. like it's a weird feeling I get, and I don't know whether that's a generational thing where the kids think it's okay and like the old men don't think so, but
I don't know. I think you do bring up a decent point where is there a line? That's really my question. I'm kind of the opinion that there isn't. I think if you like your example with the diver, if he influenced your opinion, he is he is an influencer, just like a person that's like trying to become a influencer on social media as well. You know what I mean? Like that's just the definition of influencer. And I know you're trying to make not your own definition, but you're trying to classify the different kinds of influencers.
It's like English influencer, and then there's like just English definition influencer, what I mean, and then like social media influencer is almost like that's their actual job, almost. Well, it is, in some cases.
Yeah, and they're trying to do the best they can to get as many people looking at them. I really liked your comparison with the billboard, the fact that they're trying to become that more, coveted billboard spot for companies. And I think what I think I will classify, like I'll agree with you there. If that's your goal as a person that's going onto social media, is to become a billboard, and that's essentially what you're saying. Like you're saying that these people that just try to get as many likes, as many people looking at them, that's their goal. They want to get as many people looking at them so that they can sell that prime real estate. Then I would say that they deserve a different classification. Now, I don't know if I can call them social media influencers, because I still think social media influencers too general. Because again, in my opinion, someone like Gal Gadot or someone like whoever does a lot of social media marketing, like she does marketing for Huawei. That's why I bring her up. She's actress that plays Wonder Woman. She does a lot of Twitter marketing and Instagram marketing for Huawei. I see her all the time on there. In my opinion, I would still classify her, even though she's a supermodel and an actress, I would classify her as a social media influencer still, because she's using social media to influence a product through a marketing standpoint. But I think there is a different classification. I would honestly, I like the term billboard. I think we should call them billboards.
Well, because it's interesting too, right? It's like she's an actress, so as a result, she is an influencer. And as a result, her social media presence is there. And as a result, she's diversifying her portfolio by also promoting things. It's no different than years ago, and still to this day, where big movie stars and that type of thing would advertise things on TV. Like, hey, I only chew Big Red or something, I'm a movie star and I only chew Big Red. You should too. Have a piece of Big Red. Then that's it. And that's a gum, to be clear for everyone. But it's I think it's the evolution of that. But I think what it's doing, I think the reason why I'm even bringing up this question is I actually think it's kind of, and this is almost hypocritical, I think, maybe, because I'm not against becoming an influencer in any way, but I almost think like it's destroying the platform, if you will, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. It's destroying the platforms, because there is like someone has min-maxed the way to get followers, and the best way to do that in terms of like, obviously if you go viral, whatever, but that's a random thing. If you are specifically just trying to get followers, there is a best way to do that. Maybe there's a couple of different variations of that, but there is a best way to do that. And I think that it's different now than it ever has been. Back in the day, you would you go to the movie theater, you see Wonder Woman or whatever, you're like, oh, who's that? Oh, that's that actress. Go follow on Instagram. Boom, right? It's the movie that sold it to you. You didn't just go like flipping through, I don't know, let's say she was a cosplayer for Wonder Woman. So you're flipping through your picture, like, oh, cosplayer, cool, follow her, right? Follow. It's a different thing. There's nothing wrong with either of them, but I think what it's doing is it's everyone is trying to Instagram. This is my ultimate thing. I think this might be my, I don't know, this might be my final point, but this is the ultimate thing. I think that Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and the whole bit, and I participate in this, and I have no problem with it. To full disclaimer, but I think it's becoming a game. And the reason why I think it's becoming a game is because At the end of the day, Mike and I want clicks on our stuff, right? We want people to listen to our show and all that. We try to put a good amount of work into the show, that type of thing, and we're a content creator. And it would hurt us to have nobody, monetarily and everything, to have nobody listen to our episode we make. So as a result, we have to do things that other people do on social media. And it's almost like a game. Whereas if next week, Instagram people, like the Instagram elite, if you will, or whatever you want to call them, they start saying, hey, these influencers are saying, hey, you should be putting only 3 hashtags on your posts. This is a fake scenario, people, don't do this. But like hypothetically, if they said, hey, you should only be putting 3 hashtags on your post because the Instagram algorithm is preferring that, I would be doing that. I wouldn't be just posting and being like, I hope people see our post because we need those clicks. You know what I mean, though? It's like, but what it's doing is it's making it a game because there's an invested interest in min-maxing it. And even though that always existed, at the end of the day, it almost feels more legitimate if someone comes into our podcast first and then follows us. That feels like a more natural way of gaining a following. Whereas it's the opposite, where we're getting a social media following, pointing them toward the thing. And I think that is probably what's weird, actually, if you think about it. Because that's brand new. That's a new invention. Where it's weird to say, like, normally you'd be out in the street corner, right? If you're on the street corner trying to sell your, like, I don't know, you're up a bakery, so you're trying to sell your fresh baked bread. You're trying to sell that. You're out in the street corner, you're giving out free samples of that bread. The bread's taste brings the people into your bakery. You don't have a bakery full of people and then you start building a bakery inside to make them bread. You know what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're trying to say.
It's fucking
but
weird.
It's a very difficult topic to express. I think this is this could be an episode on its own, in my opinion. It's like how the definition of social media and marketing and stuff like that, right? But I see what you're trying to say. And I agree that I also don't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Like, I don't enjoy the fact that I have to try to game the system. Like, I don't enjoy it's not really okay, so instead of gaming, I'm going to say, like, just play in the system, like being able to, like, do what the system requires. But
right.
I also don't have a solution to the problem, because if there is an algorithm, there always will be an algorithm of some sorts that needs to be followed. Like, you need to follow you need to follow the rules of that algorithm to be able to appear in the search. Like, our point is we want to help as many new developers as we possibly can by telling all our stupid stories and telling them as much as we can about the development industry as we go through it. As we learn more, we tell more, with stuff like that. To do that, like you're saying, just repeating what you're saying, we need to be in front of as many eyeballs as we can to get through to anyone out there. And for that, we need to kind of play the game. We need to make sure that we have the right hashtags. We need to make sure that we're posting consistently and stuff like all these little tricks that you're told. We have to keep doing that to make sure that we're playing the game. I don't see any way around that. But I agree with you that I don't like it as much, because it just feels like it feels ingenuine, because in real life, I wouldn't do that. That's how I feel about it. Like, in real life, I wouldn't put all these hashtags on there. I wouldn't put I wouldn't post like on a scheduled daily basis. Like, I would post when I wanted to post. Like, that's not me in real life. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you're adjusting to the way that you're supposed to do it in social media, because everyone else kind of does it that way. And really, it's determined by the platform. Like, Instagram is the one that determines how you're supposed to do it, and all the influencers follow along, and all the people that want to go and be in front of people's faces follow along. In terms of classification, again, I liked your billboard algorithm. I think that, or your billboard like analogy, where if you're a person that's literally on Instagram or Twitter or whatever to gain followers, so that people will then give you money to promote their products, I like the word billboard. Like, I think we should coin it and be like, they're a billboard. They're a human billboard.
And there's no problem with that, to be clear. Like, I mean,
I'm
open to doing that. Like, whatever,
yeah.
And I don't have a problem with that.
That's a job. Yeah. That's literally a job. Like, they're like, I mean, a billboard is there for a reason.
It's
It
one of those.
serves a function.
Well, it's also one of those things where we would rather have people listen to the podcast without having to post on social media.
We're people like that. Yeah, exactly.
Where it feels more genuine if someone, and again, this would be through a discovery feed of some sort, through a podcast app. But like hypothetically, if they just stumbled upon us, however, listened to the show, liked it, and did that, that's great. But like our social media presence is a driving tool to our content, podcasts, and then of course future other things like guides and that type of thing. It's opposite of what others are doing, and I think that's the weird thing, is because normally it's the product and the service and the whatever that bring people back. It's not like let's gain an audience and then try to sell them things. It's usually like the product sells itself to an extent, right? It's like, I have this product, so I'm going to take a bunch of fancy pictures of it and then try to sell that. I'm not taking pictures constantly of the podcast and sending that out, right? Maybe we should. Maybe we should be doing clips. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yep, so, we could be. We're doing video conferencing now, and
well, kind of. We're freaking on 3 different freaking apps.
Breaks,
and holy Christ! But anyway, like,
I think to my final thing will be a question to the audience. How were you a person that came from Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and then listened to our podcast that way, or were you a podcast first type of person and then followed us on all social media? I'm wondering what the breakdown is. My guess, and I'm just gonna guess, I think more people listen to the podcast first, to be honest. But I'm curious to know.
That's a good question, honestly, because I mean, there's the discovery engines of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
See, even that's a game too, and so yep. Like, realistically,
well, we don't really do anything to game in that. All we do is post consistently. Like,
you post consistently, but you make sure that your titles, we make sure that our titles are not just episode 46. So you are hitting those keywords. Like if someone types in web development and all those keywords, tap into web development, it's like boom, you show up in a search result.
But I feel like we don't go out of our way to do that. Like, I like our titles, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think those are useful for the audience.
Yes, they're very useful.
Like, yes, exactly. Like, I personally don't think that hashtags are very useful to the audience. You know what I mean? Like, when on Instagram, I don't think that posting every single day is useful to the audience on Instagram, like, too much. That's why it feels awkward to me. But having detailed show notes and detailed descriptions and stuff like that, like, I'm not going out of my way to make sure that there's a keyword in there for the most part. Like, I'm making sure that it's just like the episode is represented correctly. That's it.
Yes, I think that's the different, and that could be a generational thing where people just say like, hey, we want to become an influencer, you go and do it, or maybe it's just an opinion thing where some people want to sell a product. I don't know. It's a weird. I think I came up with this idea because I heard on another show or something where people were saying that social media feels really fake, and I always thought to myself, I'm like, back in high school, it didn't really feel very fake to me. Facebook was new. MySpace was dying. That was my generation. And so, in terms of high school, and it didn't feel fake to me, like people were posting pictures or whatever. But they didn't post a picture specifically with like a certain brand in it, or they didn't post a picture specifically with like certain tags on it to get like 1 million people to look at it. It was just like the algorithm would, hand it out to the people that had them friended essentially, and that was it. And so I think maybe it's just the fact that it's weird to generate an audience to direct to someplace rather than having an item generate an audience and then you can direct the thing. I think there's like a missing step there, or it's a different step is now the thing. And that's what's strange, I think, maybe. But I I'd also love to hear from, I think, what would be freaking awesome actually. And I don't know whether there's any of them listening right now. It'd be awesome to have an Instagram influencer, one that literally became like a billboard on the show. I think would be a super interesting conversation because they would know a bunch about how to update yourself on Instagram, how to upgrade yourself on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and how to keep that focus alive, and like what the difference between an influencer and someone who's trying to just straight up sell a product, like Nike is trying to sell their shoes and whatever, right? That would be a super interesting guest. So if you're interested in that, or you have any interest in that, shoot us a message on any of the things or email us or whatever, because that would be a super interesting guest. Because like we don't know, there's a hole in our knowledge there. So I think we're good to go before this app freezes inevitably again, unless you have anything else to say, Mike.
Nope, wrap her up before the app freezes.
All right, so I'm going to talk really quick. No, it's just like an auctioneer. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can follow us on the socials via @HTML all the things, which is for Facebook and Instagram, which is for Facebook and Instagram. We're also at HTML everything, which is on Twitter. We're on Medium at the moment, and more news on that later. And we're also on GitHub. And make sure you check out our Patreon, and that's patreon.com/HTML all the things. Check out the tiers, give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons, which is Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript. You can find him at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. Again, works is spelled WERKS. As well as Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design. You can find them at localpathcomputing.com, as well as Craig, aka Cosworth. And, of course, feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on. And we are signing off for the third time.